When we talk about food styling, it's easy to think about magazines and cookbooks, perfect pictures, controlled environments, and a world that feels far removed from the reality of our busy kitchens. But the more I spoke to pro food stylist Lou Kenney, it became clearer. The techniques that food stylists use to design food for print are exactly the same ones that platists rely on every day, whether we realise it or not.
You're telling stories with food, really, painting pictures, bringing atmosphere, I suppose, and also making the food look delicious and achievable so that people look at the picture and go, God, that looks so good, I want to make it.
In publishing, food doesn't just get plated. It gets planned, edited, and thought through long before anything actually hits the plate. The process forces clarity because food has to communicate instantly.
Always will sketch out. If I feel unsure about a dish or I'm not sure how to style it, or I will definitely do drawings beforehand. I do use like Pinterest sometimes, just kind of pulling pictures if I'm working with someone else, and then I've got a plan of what I can follow on the day.
What struck me in the podcast episode was how familiar that mindset should feel to chefs. It's about instantly reducing uncertainty, making decisions earlier, and making intentional choices rather than just slopping it on. Because so much of design theory is applicable to food as it is web design or architecture, or when I speak to chefs about this topic, nobody is taught it. I find it amazing for such a visual medium that there isn't any sort of structure around it. And when you look at plating through that lens, the benefits suddenly becomes clear.
Less is more, don't overload. If you feel like you put too much on and it's looking too busy, take 2 or 3 elements away and see how it looks, and then try adding 1 more back in. 100% of the time you'll make tweaks and change things around.
Yeah. This isn't about style for style's sake. It's about editing under pressure and understanding why something works and why it doesn't. Because in the end, plating is the last thing that a chef does, but it's the first thing the customer sees. Whether you're designing food for a camera, plating for a dinner party, or sending plates out during service, the goal's the same: to make the food read clearly, to guide the eye, and to make intentional choices that do the work for you. That's what this fascinating podcast episode is really all about. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Food MD podcast, where we explore the visual side of food. Today I'm here with food stylist Lou Kenney. Hi Lou.
Hello.
How's it going?
Great.
Thank you so much for doing this with me today. It's really exciting, I think, to get a perspective of a food stylist professional. But maybe we could just start with, give us a quick overview of what a food stylist is and what you do, please.
So I guess a food stylist is someone who makes pictures out of food. So somebody who needs to know how to cook. So more often than not, they've got chef training. I went to a cookery school probably about sort of 16 years ago now. And a food stylist works on multiple different projects. So you could be a food stylist / home economist. So stills is usually what a food stylist will work on. So editorial content for magazines, cookbooks. So you'd be shopping for the food, cooking the food, and then dressing it on the plate, working with a photographer, with a prop stylist, with an art director, with an author, with an agent, with lots of different people kind of on a shoot. You're telling stories with food, really, painting pictures, sort of bringing atmosphere, I suppose, and also making the food look delicious and achievable so that people look at the picture and go, God, that looks so good, I want to make it. That looks so good. So yeah, editorial would be sort of magazines and cookbooks, so I do that quite a lot. And then the home economy side of things would be more working on commercials, adverts, film, TV shows. So that could be anything from a cooking show to a drama. Yeah, I mostly work on editorial, but I do a little bit of telly as well and some commercials on the side, it's just a slightly different skill set. But it's pretty much the same thing, trying to make the food look great, so people want to make it or buy it. Yeah,
so there's a fair bit of overlap between chefs, home cooks that want to make their stuff, that make their food present and look as good as possible.
Yeah.
But I guess you get involved slightly higher, more in the wider image, almost like with the table, the setting, the table, the colours, the napkins, all that kind of stuff. That we're focused probably more on the inside of the plate, whereas a lot you could do that plus the environmental side of it as well.
Yeah, I guess what I would be working with a prop stylist who might get a brief, for example, from an editor. Let's say we're working on a cookbook. They get a brief from the editor to say, this is our kind of colour palette. This is the sort of style. We want it kind of loose, or we want it tight and minimal, or we want lots of contrast in the lighting. The colour palette and sort of mood is what a prop stylist will. It makes a huge difference to to how food looks, depending on what plate it's on, or what background is behind it, or how the lighting is, or the focus, or we're sort of involved in all of that as well. It's a big team effort, basically.
Yeah, so I mean, effectively, that you could be wearing all those hats, I assume, depending on budget, or you might have a couple other people to do those other bits as well, but effectively you have the skill set to do all of it if you're the only resource that the client can find, I guess.
Yeah, often on a book shoot, they might not have the money for a prop stylist to be on set or an art director to be on set. So more often than not, I might be working just with the photographers, just the two of us. And the prop stylist would have dropped all the props off, laid it all out, labelled it all up so we know what dish goes on what, recipe goes on what dish. And then we'd kind of play. It is a lot of play. But then there's also the time limit of we've got to get through 9 or 10 shots in a day, and we've got a hard out at 6 p.m, so we've got to make sure we've got everything done by then. So it might just be me and a photographer working together, which I love those smaller teams. It's slightly less complicated. Yeah,
I think the collaborative effort is something when I work with more chefs than other photographers, clearly, but that collaborative effort is really exciting. I want to go back to something you said a second ago, actually, in terms of the play side of it, because I think that's really important. But do you have, because one of the things I mention on this channel a lot is to try and sketch before people, certainly chefs or home cooks, just have a rough idea of what you're doing before you just look at this blank white plate and panic.
Yeah.
Is that something that you guys would do as well? So do you sketch things out even if it's only fairly blocked, so at least you have that starting point of something to jump off from?
I almost always will sketch out. If I feel unsure about a dish, or I'm not sure how to style it, or I will definitely do drawings beforehand, and that's kind of experimenting really with how it could look, and then I've got a plan of what I can follow on the day if I'm feeling a bit sort of underconfident about something. I do think drawing pictures and having sort of different coloured pens and pencils, or if it's just one pencil or a pen, it's so useful, because you can look at shapes, you can look at how much you might want to put on a plate. You can, if you've got colours, you can kind of play with the colours and go, okay, I think we might need like more green on there or more red, or I don't know. I think drawing's really useful, and nobody else is going to be looking at it, so it's purely for my own reference.
Well, I think this is the thing. A lot of people say to me, well, I can't draw, and I don't think it really matters. You just need to try and I think colour is really important, composition is really important, and just having that starting point rather than the mild panic. And it's just fascinating, and that's something that you will do as well.
Yeah, I do that all the time. And then even when we're, because we're building a picture, especially if it's stills and also for moving image, you'll, look through the camera, check the positioning of things, maybe think about negative space, which is really important on a plate as well as in a whole picture, or filling things in, or a little bit of, maybe we want a little bit of shadow on there from a leaf, and you kind of place that.
Yeah.
So, being able to kind of play beforehand, but also while you're doing it, I think is really important, because life's too short not to play.
Well, it is. I think the element of play is where creativity, the best ideas come from, don't they, really? You can't force these things, I don't think.
Yeah, you can't. And sometimes as well, I find drawing is really useful if you're thinking about doing something new and different and going in a different direction. So sometimes if you're on a job, you just want to get the job done and you go the shortest route,
Path of least resistance.
The path of least resistance. I know this works, I'm going to do that every time. But then that can get quite kind of boring and you're not kind of pushing yourself. So I think drawing can really help if you really want to go in a new direction and want to trial a different kind of plating idea.
So in terms of inspiration then, again, one of the things I talk about in the training guide kit that I've got coming out is getting things like, there's a term in graphic design called a swipe file. Have you ever come across that? So a swipe file is basically just keeping like clippings from magazines, or on your Instagram keeping little folders of different types of imagery. So for example, I have the different plating layouts. So I have isolated, I have condensed layouts, and all those different things to give me ideas of what to do. So I assume, is that something that you will do quite a lot of? Do you inhale? I mean, looking around your house, the amount of cookbooks you have is incredible. So clearly you even if you don't know you're doing it necessarily, you are constantly looking at imagery and stuff like that for inspiration. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, but not just cookbooks.
Okay.
So I'm really inspired by art. So paintings, sculpture, also film. There's so many great films out there with either amazing food, or you've got kind of, like I did a project recently, just a test project where I was just sort of trialing something, and it was based on the book like Water for Chocolate, which is a Mexican book, and it's got a recipe at the beginning of every chapter, and then the chapter sort of just goes through the sort of the storyline. But food is a huge part of the book, and I got really inspired by it. And then at the same time, the ballet of it was on. So I went, and I love dance, so I went and looked at the ballet as well. It's all sort of visual references and moods. And I do use like Pinterest sometimes, just kind of pulling pictures if I'm working with someone else.
Yeah.
Where it's a mood board, basically.
So you'll share that with the photographer or the other people on the team?
Yeah, and they might add to it as well. So usually, for example, before a cookbook or even before a magazine, you'll always get your brief, which will have a mood board in it. It'll have a styling guide of how they hope the food will look. They'll have, colour palette. They'll have sort of, not mock-ups, but examples of how they want it to look, drawn from other imagery.
It's interesting listening to Lou talk about inspiration, swipe files, film, mood boards, collecting references. As you might have noticed a few minutes ago, I mentioned the Platist training kit. This is exactly where it fits in, because inspiration is powerful, but without structure, it stays abstract. The training kit is designed to help you translate inspiration into decisions. There are tools there to help train your eye, prompts for when you get stuck, and a framework to assess your own plate's property, so you're not just guessing. It's about building your own visual language, not copying someone else's. If that sounds useful, you'll find it in the description below. And actually, this leads perfectly into what we talk about next, because inspiration is one thing, but confident plating starts with what happens before the food even hits the plate. So let's get into that. I think it's such an important lesson to learn, is these things don't just appear out the ether, do they really? It takes work, and it's that effort you put in before you even think about going into a kitchen that really makes a difference. And I know from a photography point of view, even when I'm doing headshots or other styles of photography, the more effort you do before the shoot day, the more successful that shoot day will be, because you're not scrabbling around for ideas and that panic and that fear of, oh my God, what on earth am I going to do? Especially if you've got client there and stuff like that. So, I mean, even for a home cook or a chef, who doesn't necessarily have another team, I think all these things are really good key points to try and think about in advance of, if you are spending an awful lot of time for a dinner party or something like that, just to take 5 minutes just to sit down and sketch things out. I mean, is that something from a personal level that you might do when you are entertaining or anything like that? Do you go as far as that? Or because, I guess because it's almost intrinsic, isn't it, really? That these images are now kind of part of your process.
It is now, and I say I've sort of got my kind of style, but I used to be a caterer. I mean, I still do that sometimes on the side, and I would, especially if I was doing like a plated dinner, like a 3-course dinner, which occasionally happened, doesn't really happen anymore, but I would always sketch out how I was going to plate up the starter, main and pudding beforehand, so that I was prepared for the day. But I think that there's just so many great kind of references around, and you can take inspiration from nature, and cookbooks are a great resource as well. I love print, really love it, and I love being able to kind of sort of thumb through my cookbooks and look at the pictures and the recipes, and you sort of read it before you go to sleep at night. It's just really relaxing. It's a really nice thing to do.
Okay, all right, that's good. So how did you get into the styling?
Well, I've always really done it ever since I went to cookery school a long time ago as a kind of, I took a year out from life. I'd had a bit of my mum had died, and I was not in a great headspace and really needed something to kind of bring me back to life. And it's amazing how cooking and food can really help with that. And so I took a year off and spent some time with friends who were farming in various different parts of the country, and also went to cookery school. And it was just sort of touted as something that you could do. And I had some friends when I left cookery school, when I came back to London, because I went abroad, I went to Ireland to do my training. And I had some friends who were food stylists and recipe writers, and I just got in touch with them and said, I've just finished my training, would love to come and help you. And a couple of them were so generous and got me on shoots, and I went and assisted them. So that's really the path, is to find a food stylist whose work you like, get in touch with them, assist them, and then try and assist more people and learn lots of different ways of doing things. And I just learnt by looking and learnt by watching. It's not really something that you get taught at cookery school.
It's so funny you say that, because it's almost identical. When I have, because clearly I'm not a chef by any stretch of the imagination, but when I speak to chefs about this topic, nobody is taught it. You know, you might get shown when you go to a certain, when you're working in a certain restaurant, a style of that chef or something like that. That's the only time people seem to pick anything up, as opposed to, you know, when I've spoken to people who've gone through culinary school, there is virtually nothing there of a formal nature other than make it look nice. It's like, well, where do you start? And I find it amazing for such a visual medium that there isn't any sort of structure around it, because so much of design theory is applicable to food as it is web design or architecture or all these sorts of things.
Or just painting, you know, art.
Absolutely.
You know, there are quite a few food stylists who have been to art school
I can believe it.
and then move into food. Like there's somebody that I know who trained as a sculptor, and she now makes objects, usually kind of anatomical bits of the body, out of chocolate.
Wow.
For film and TV, and they're so lifelike. And then you watch her on her little sort of Instagram, and she cuts into a horny toe or a disgusting kind of end of an arm or something. You're like, there's so many things that you can do. It's really can be really super arty, but and not necessarily realistic. You know, in terms of a salad on a plate or whatever.
Yeah. Well, that's incredible. I thought what I did was niche, but chocolate body parts.
Yep.
There you go. You see, there's a market for everybody, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, she's called that. I don't know her personally, but it's called the Edible Museum, and she's really amazing.
Yeah.
She'd be great to talk to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it does sound like there is an awful lot of overlap between, you know, I think what trying to do on this channel and certainly food styling side. Is there anything that you can think of that is a good, you know, some good practices or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, a good practice is, I say this to my husband all the time, use the rim of a plate as your frame, and don't put any food on the rim of the plate. Okay. And put all of the food sort of in the middle of it. If it's a plate that has, sometimes they have like that sort of like frame around the outside of the band. Yeah. And less is more, don't overload. Take things away.
It's so tempting, isn't it? Though?
Yeah.
Because you want to be generous. You want to be seen as, caring and all that kind of stuff. And that comes a lot of the time with volume.
Yes.
But volume isn't necessarily good.
It can actually be really overwhelming. I mean, I do that to my kids all the time. I put far too much food on their plate, really think they're going to eat it, and then they don't. Yeah. I'd say it's different if you're like, for example, making food for a buffet. I think that's a great place to start. You're not focusing on one plate. Yeah. You've got loads of salads and some meats. You've got like sort of 5 or 6 different bowls or platters. I really like cooking that way. I love family style people helping themselves. It looks generous, and it also looks really impressive, but you haven't done a huge amount. So if somebody's a bit nervous maybe about, like a home cook, about sort of plating things up and, I don't know, getting it wrong because they want to impress people. First of all, there's no right way of doing it, really. I don't think, and second of all, start with a big kind of like buffet kind of dish, or even you could be making a pie. Make a fun design with some forks on the top, with a fork on the top of the mashed potato. Start there in a kind of comes back to play and experimentation and not being afraid to get it wrong, because there is no real wrong. It's just what you enjoy looking at, what you think looks nice. I
completely agree. For me, it's almost like a mind shift change to make intentional choices rather than just slopping it on or what have you. And even with communal plates, the good thing about a communal plate, I think, is that you don't need to worry about almost like a front or a viewing angle, because people come in from all over the place. But things still will make a difference. Colour, getting the right mix of protein and garnish and things like that, so it's not all just homogenized brown.
I think garnish is really important when you're doing like a big buffet or something. Let's say you're doing potato salad and it's white with loads of mayonnaise, or it's kind of creamy, kind of yellow, depending on what you've got in it. Just putting some chopped up parsley on the top or some chives, sprinkling that over the top, just a tiny bit. It breaks up the colour. It's use the same thing with black pepper on. So if I'm styling an egg, for example, or something that's quite homogeneous in colour, breaking it up with a tiny little bit of, I don't know, sea salt or black that contrasts, from black pepper, that contrasts with the colour underneath, really helps to break up the picture. And if you're looking on a camera, the before and after of adding that kind of garnish, simply salt and pepper or a bit of herbs, it's really different.
Yeah.
And it makes something pop out and look more enticing.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's a bit more chefy, but what certainly, because I was writing a script for a video I'm doing on sauces and sourcing and basically liquids on the plate, not just sauces as such, but
that's tricky.
the amount of images I saw, which I really like, whereby you've got, you know, like a pool of sauce, but then you get little drops of oil in there, you know, some herb oil or something like that. Immediately it elevates, you know, that visually. I'm sure from a taste point of view as well, because I always say it's not talking about the taste here, it's purely about what it looks and what sauces and things can do from a visual point of view. And just having those little aspects, and especially with an oil, because it just glistens in the light and you get much more organic shapes and things like that. So, you know, all those sorts of things, even on large communal platters, still need to be, I think, are still important. It's just, again, viewing angle and composition could be probably a little bit more relaxed, because it's a communal, it's an authentic, it's you know, it may well be a particular style of cuisine, something like that, which is just meant to be shared. And that could be really nice. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about was colour. Because clearly colour is fundamental in food and really, really important. Maybe you could talk about when you've had a brief or something, and how do you involve things like colour theory? Because I assume colour theory is something that think about. I've done a few videos on the channel about complementary colours, analogous colours, things like that. Do you go into that level of thought about it? So you know complementary colours of like reds and greens. Clearly reds and greens in food is a really powerful combination. You've got oranges and blues, is it? I think is the other side, and then you have...
Yellow and purple?
Right?
Or is it orange and purple, yellow and blue?
I can't quite remember. I could put up a graph anyway. I'll put up a graph. But I mean, is that something that you will actively try and use? I mean, clearly I know from speaking to you before that taste is still really important, and a recipe, even though it's for an editorial, still has to work. But, you know, do you include those sort of real design theory things of colour technique, colour theory and things like that? Is that...
I think, yes, sort of yes and no. I have a very basic understanding from primary school of colours and complementary colours and shadows and, you know, what, and from a little bit of kind of drawing and looking at kind of art and stuff. I would say the colour kind of theory, or at least sort of colour palette, is maybe less about, I don't know, maybe it's just sort of intrinsic, I'm not sure. I'd say a prop stylist and an art director would be, you know, heavily involved in that, sort of drawing together sort of colour palettes. I've done some work, sort of monochrome work in black and white.
Monochrome just blows my mind. Because it's so hard. It must be so hard.
It can be quite hard. Or just you know, one simple colour, like I did some jellies with a photographer, all in green. And that was really good fun. And I did, well, it wasn't really monochrome, but it's sort of like I did some, you know, vanilla pods and made panna cotta, and so that's the black and white, obviously monochrome. But it had a little bit of yellow from what is it called, chamomile. I've got some little chamomile flowers. Anyway, that's sort of an aside. Yeah, colour theory, it feels like it's more intrinsic than something that I consciously think about. But when we're selecting plates and stuff for a recipe, you'll always be looking, what's the background colour? What's the plate colour? What is, oh, hang on, this dish is really quite brown. I can't go on that plate. It's not going to work. So there is a bit of conversation and back and forth about what food's going to look good in what kind of dish.
Yeah, because I think colour is just so important, but often underrated. And again, it's a difficult thing to, I think, certainly speak to chefs about, because they think it's going to be something that you have to try and shoehorn the colour in. And it's not that at all, but it's just having that thought process that if you can get a little bit of red with the green, or if you can get, you know, something like that without fundamentally changing the ingredient by cheating or something like that, or, you know, just by using a bit of dye. That's not what we're talking about here. It's about keeping it authentic, but just having that little bit of knowledge that these colours work together.
I mean, it definitely comes in with things like garnish for like on the top of a plate, but it has to be, from my perspective, it has to be an ingredient that would be in the recipe already. So it might be a bit of parsley that's in the base of the sauce but isn't finished, and so okay, well, it needs a bit of green, and I can use parsley because it's in the ingredients, even though it's not part of the garnish. So yeah, there'd be that, and also drinks. So if we're kind of composing a picture. Drinks can make a really big difference as well in terms of their colour, depending on what you're using. Slices of lemon, slices of lime, that's used a lot. Again, the green and the yellow can really kind of make something.
Just adds vibrancy.
It does add vibrancy, yeah.
And again, that glisten and things like that.
Yeah, and can tell a bit of a story as well, especially if it's like partly squeezed or somebody's in the middle of making their tacos and it all looks.
Yeah.
You can imagine yourself there making it. Well, at least that's what we tell ourselves when we're doing the pictures.
So again, one of the things you mentioned earlier is less is more. And again, I've done a video on less is more. How do you know when to stop?
Well, I don't often. And often
that's not the answer I wanted.
Often it will be sometimes it's making the mistake of putting too much on a plate and then going, okay, what can I take away from this? It's hard if you've added a sauce already, but then I've got lots of little tips and tricks, like I've got syringes and pipettes so I can take sauce away if there's too much. Cotton buds are a really important part of my toolkit, so that again can kind of take just a teeny tiny bit away if it's just running over the edges. But yeah, if you feel like you put too much on and it's looking too busy, take 2 or 3 elements away and see how it looks and then try adding 1 more back in. It's a bit like dressing and accessories. I mean, everybody's got their personal preference, haven't they, of what they like. And I think that's also so much of it is what do you like? What do you like looking at? We eat with our eyes first. And so what to you is something that, is it volume that you know are enticed by and think, yeah, fantastic, or is it, you know, symmetry and order? Like my husband absolutely loves, I mean, he's, you know, not a chef, but he loves order on his plate, and I like mess and organic and it all being quite like free flowing. So just everybody's different.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about it, because my wife. So again, the 4 different plating layouts that I identified in this is you've got stacked, so everything's kind of on top of each other. You've got linear, so curves, straight lines. Isolated, so you know everything has space around it, and then condensed, which is condensing everything kind of thing. I would definitely put my wife in the isolated category because she's somebody that doesn't like to
things to
mix.
Touch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very much more of a condensed kind of guy. I like everything together and eat it. But it's fascinating how people sort of steer towards certain layouts and certain preferences. I think. And but going back to the less is more. Is that just your eye over years of experience that you realise that there is too much, or is it it's just that play factor that you're talking about before you've got where to start, you've loaded it all up, and then you think once, because again with the camera, something is very different in my head to when you've actually pushed the shutter and then you actually see it.
Yeah, it looks
very
so different on camera to real life sometimes when you're taking pictures.
It really, really does, and is that where you kind of then edit the process a little bit?
Yeah, so we might always, take a shot of a dish. I think, oh, it's done, it looks amazing, fantastic. And then you go around, look at it on the camera, chat to the photographer, and you go, oh, that's in the wrong place, that needs moving here. 100% of the time, you'll make tweaks and change things around.
Yeah.
Or there's a hole in the things pop up on a camera, on an image on a camera that you just don't see with your naked eye.
Yeah.
So there might be, a little kind of dark patch that needs filling in with a bit of food, or there might be a too much of a straight line and it needs kind of breaking up with some leaves or a bit of spaghetti or whatever it is that the dish is. I mean, we can look at that later when we're doing sort of plating. I can give you, give people an idea of this is what I can see now on the camera, right. And so therefore I'm going to make this change because it doesn't look good in the shot. It looks great on the plate, but not so good in the shot.
Yep.
And that is a fundamental difference. I'm styling for photography or for film, and so people are looking at it through that lens rather than with a naked eye.
But I think again, it's one of those things that I recommend is to actually do that. Probably more if you're a professional chef as opposed to a home cook to go to that level of taking a shot afterwards. Yeah. But I think it is different, and because food is such a visual medium now, especially with social media and how all chefs are now putting their work all over the internet, that actually having an eye for the camera is probably not a bad idea. And again, I don't think it makes work less, it makes it inauthentic by worrying about what it looks like. Yes. There's a lot of I find a lot of resistance of it's about taste only. I don't care what it looks like. Well, I think that's not doing justice to your own work.
No.
Do you know what I mean? It's not about trying to make it Instagram worthy, but it's trying to show that you care about what you do, the effort that you've put into creating the recipe, and then also that you've plated it with care to show the ingredients in the best way that you possibly can.
Yeah, and also it's kind of, again, it comes back to fun. It's quite fun to kind of work. I find it fun to work that way.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's, from my perspective, yes, it's does the recipe work? Is it delicious? But I'm also showing, you know, how it could look. I think people sometimes get a bit annoyed with food stylists. They're like, my food never looks like it looks in the picture. I'm like, well, it's not your job, so of course it's not going to look like that. We're giving you an idea of what it could look like, but it doesn't have to look like that.
And it's taken 4 people hours and hours and hours and hours to do that. That didn't just happen.
It didn't just happen. It was very kind of considered. And
I mean, that's the trouble with the intentional mess. You know, that intentional mess, which I'm sure you get into your images and stuff like that, which is, you know, intentional mess is one of the hardest things to do because it looks contrived really easily.
Yeah, it really does. It really does look contrived.
Yeah.
The number of times I've just got kind of taken a handful of something like parmesan or whatever and just kind of held it up high and then gone like that and then okay, I've got to sweep a bit away. And, you know, there's so much that goes into it to make it look sort of enticing. But it does come back to, like with chefs, your customers are going to eat with their eyes. I mean, a chef knows that. You know, they know that that's what somebody sits down and goes, wow, that looks amazing. Especially if they come out and spent a lot of money to come and taste your delicious food. Yeah. They want to feel like they're getting their money's worth, and the presentation is, you know, half of it.
The thing I try and get across is that plating is the last thing that a chef does, but it's the first thing the customer sees. Yeah. So it's kind of that introduction, that first impression, as we all know how important first impressions are. Yeah. That it can make a massive difference. So,
which is why it's so funny. It's not taught.
It's mad,
when you go to kind of chef school or cookery school. I remember the first dish I made was, I think it was a Thai green curry and rice. I had no idea what I was doing. I followed the recipe, made it, and we were marked on presentation and we were marked on flavour, and I can't remember something else. Yeah. There were definitely 2 marks out of 5 or whatever. And I was like, oh, I'll put the curry in a bowl. I'll just put that in a bowl there. And where am I going to put that? I'll just I put the bowl on a plate and then I put a mound of rice next to it. I mean, it looked so awful. And I was really shocked, but it was a good learning curve for me that I got like 1 for presentation because it looked so awful. Yeah. And after that, I started kind of going, okay, I really got with the programme. But there was no, and I just looked at what's everyone else doing. I like what they're doing there. Okay, I'm going to maybe employ that or do that with my next dish. And when we go back to talking about like influencers and stuff, you know, chefs eating in other restaurants, looking at how they do that all the time, looking at how other people are, you know, how other chefs are doing, you know, plating food and cookery books too. I think I think they're really useful.
I think that's actually a very interesting point what you said about, you know, that dish that you marked on in your course. The fact that you got 2 marks, both out of 5, so 50-50 on what it looks like and the flavour. Yet I imagine all you were taught was how to cook it and what the flavours are, and yet half of the mark is for something that you're not taught anything about.
Yeah, that's mad. There wasn't much like obvious teaching on how to plate. We did have demonstrations, obviously, from our teachers, and so they did. You know, I just watched them how they plated it, but it wasn't talked through. I'm putting this here because I'm putting that there because I'm taking this away because I'm adding this because. So it wasn't. Yeah, there was no sort of necessary reasoning to it. It was just what that particular teacher liked on that day when it was like decorating cakes. Yep. You know, some of them quite old school, and so it was. You know. Lots of sort of flourishes of whipped cream and things like that. And again, not particularly stylised necessarily, but it does feel sometimes like flavour's more important than visuals. But I think the two go hand in hand.
I think that it's not that I'm advocating for visuals to be more than taste, but I just think they need to come higher up the pecking order, if you see what I mean. Just in terms of when you're creating a recipe or whatever it might be, it just needs to be in the conversation more than it, not for 1 second saying it's more important. Of course it's not, but I do think there's more place for it to be seen as more important in the process of creation, if you know what I mean.
And when I'm writing, because I write recipes as well and write cookbooks, when I'm writing a recipe, I'm always thinking about how's this going to look? Yeah. What shape of pasta, if I'm doing pasta, what shape of pasta shall I use in this? What's going to be visually appealing? What shall I suggest here? You know, it's, you know, flavour and types of ingredients, but also the visual element does come in for me. So like, you know, to serve, I always have like at the bottom of my ingredients list to serve, and then it'll be, you know, a number of things that you can kind of add to the dish.
I think the sort of one of the last things I wanted to talk to you about, we touched on it earlier a little bit when you were talking about the plate and leaving space around the rim. So negative space and things like that. What are your thoughts on how to sort of bring that into designs?
I think breaking a line is really useful. So again, it comes down to what style you like.
Yeah.
So I'm not totally rigid about having nothing on the edge of the plate. What I don't want is, a large dinner plate and the entire plate is covered in food, and that I'm just like completely overwhelmed.
Less a roast dinner than that's a fine.
Well, exactly. Yeah, that's the only time where it's okay. Massive, Yorkshire pudding. That's probably the only time. But for me, when I'm kind of plating something up, I'm thinking about the frame, but I'm also thinking about how to break the edges of the frame. Are there any kind of ingredients, like a little bit of sauce or some herbs or some salad leaves so that there's a bit of interest in how it looks, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But just having that as a principle, using the edge of your plate as a frame is really helpful. For less is more, because you can't fit quite so much on the middle of a plate, even if it's sort of spaced apart. And then it's not kind of overwhelming when you kind of set it down in front of somebody, and it's you've made a picture with the food, and so that's your frame.
Because it's a difficult thing. Things like visual weight and balance is a very difficult thing to try and describe.
Yeah.
It's one of those things you can only kind of see when you see it, I think. What I find that is a good rule of thumb possibly is what style of dish you're going for, because negative space in a more higher fine dining thing and taster menus whereby you're having lots of different courses.
And it's all tiny.
And that precision is really important.
Yeah.
Having space is even more important.
Yeah.
But I think even for the home cook or the person trying to do the dinner party or the learning chef, again, less is more. Not trying to cram too much on, let the space breathe a little bit is really, really important. And also then including things like your sauces in that as well, because I found in a lot of the imagery that I looked at for my sourcing video, so much of the visual balance is made up with the sauce as well, because it pools and gets slightly wider, so you've got your positive space of whatever the protein or the main thing is, a little sauce on the side. You need to think about both of that, especially symmetry or asymmetry if that's what you're going for, things like that. And that consideration through, I think going back to our original point about sketching and things like that is really, really important. Yeah. Because otherwise especially if you're working, it's maybe slightly different for you because you've got an entire day to play with these things. And
it doesn't have to be hot.
And it doesn't have to eat with
the pressure of a home cook and a restaurant kitchen is, this has got to go now, somebody's got to eat it now, because otherwise it's not going to be tasty. Yeah. Whereas I'm on a shoot, doesn't matter if it gets cold. Yeah. It does, because you have to know how, but it's not about being tasted necessarily. Yeah. Unless you're trying to capture steam, for example. We've got all sorts of tips and tricks on how to get steam in a shot. Yeah, but it doesn't. It's always cold at the end of the day, unless if we're doing like a stew or something like that. Then I'll have some spare kind of sauce on the side that is hot. I'll add hot water to it so that I can sheet it so it looks like it's a hot dish. Because fat congeals and goes all cloudy, and you can't have that in the shot because it's not enticing and it doesn't look great. So you have to. So some things do have to be hot, but it's not because it's going to be eaten. It's just because it's how it looks. I've got so many different bits of kit. Like I've got a paint stripper, heat gun that I use for melting mozzarella on pizzas because it gives a great, lovely. It just gives, you can get the lovely pull, you can control the pull more. I always use grated mozzarella instead of a ball of mozzarella because it's less wet. Anyway, that's a whole other story, but
Clearly, as a stylist, you want to progress and do things differently. You've got the way that you work. What rules do you try and break sometimes? Or have you been inspired through seeing what other stylists have done or other chefs where you think, I love that, but it's not what I'd normally do. I'm going to try it next time.
I think there's always a question over like odd numbers on a plate, like, I don't know, meatballs or falafel or, I don't know, something where you can tell how many bits of one particular ingredient there are. As a rule of thumb, odd numbers apparently look slightly more appealing to the eye than even numbers because there's slightly less of a balance. It's almost like you're adding imperfection, which is why you're going with odd. I really like that. But work with some people who don't necessarily agree with that, and they're happy to have an even number of things on a plate. Whereas I almost always go with odd. The other thing is around straight lines. So in what I do, most of my style is very natural and loose, and so I'm always looking for, is there like a straight line? Does this look too much like dot to dot? And so therefore replacing bits on a plate. So I don't tend to use straight lines that much because it feels too. It just feels too contrived. Yeah, it doesn't feel, especially because if I'm working on a cookbook, somebody's going to be making that at home or in a restaurant kitchen. But, I want it to look achievable and natural rather than regimented and unattainable. I think sometimes, home cooks can feel a bit intimidated if something looks too perfect and they're like, well, I'm never going to be able to make that. Yeah. So my aim whenever I work on a shoot is to try and make something look achievable and really beautiful.
I think you probably said slightly earlier, there are no rules and you do what you like.
Yeah.
But I think, having an idea of what the rules are and then trying to go the other way, be a bit more of contrarian, can be quite a smart way to go, especially if you are trying to do something that's pushing boundaries a little bit more. I mean, I should have brought a picture of it, but one of my favourite plates that I found recently was, I think it was a French guy, and it was basically just a whole leg of a chicken with the foot still on it, but the foot was actually hanging over the edge of the plate, and it was kind of, so if that's the plate, it was kind of off-centre.
Off-centre, yeah.
But because it actually broke the line of the plate, it kind of like, blow my mind, might slightly overdo it, but it made me look. Do you know what I mean? Especially when you're scrolling through loads of stuff like, well, you don't see that very often.
Arresting. Yeah, it was an arresting image, but because of the simplicity of it, really.
Yeah, but that placement was so important because it was literally just I assume it was a roasted leg. It had a few little flowers on it or something like that, just to break up the brown of the beautiful skin. But it was the fact the claw was still on it, but the claw was just over the edge of the rim. Oh. That's a brave thing to do, especially leaving the foot on, especially in this country. Yeah. But then also having it going over the edge of the plate. And I just thought it was a really strong image.
A really strong image. Yeah, and made you stop. So that's useful, isn't it?
Because I look a bit like you. I look at food a lot, and to have that sort of impact on me, it might not be for everybody, to see it like that. But for me, I thought that was really, really brave, but a really powerful just image.
I guess I was thinking as well about, you were asking about colour theory earlier on, and now you're talking about breaking the edge of the plate. I'm now also thinking about shape is really important. So shapes in, I don't know, like you might be shooting a loaf cake, for example, and instead of just having the whole loaf, there it is on its own, you cut it, you slice it, you fan the sort of slices out. You might have a slice kind of like half eaten, some crumbs here and there. You're sort of building up shapes. There's triangles and kind of rectangles and oblongs or whatever they're all called. They've got different names now from when I was at school. And I use the other thing that I use a lot is S shapes. Yep. So the idea of, let's say you've got your kind of rectangular image, whether it's overhead or whatever, I'm always thinking of, we read from left to right in this country. I'm always thinking of the angles from top left all the way down to bottom right. I'm like, that's the eye kind of naturally, because we've been trained to read that way, the eye naturally kind of follows that way. And you want to take somebody on a bit of a journey, so I'm always going with S shapes, use them a lot, especially with things like spaghetti or with salads. And that can be quite a useful, sort of the eyes kind of traveling somewhere. It's not just like looking at one thing. You've got sort of interest in the picture. It's a bit of a journey. It sounds so frivolous and a bit like a bit wanky, for use for a better word. And it is a bit, but I love it.
I like the word intentional.
It's intentional. Yeah. Yes, it's intentional and thought through, and it's good. And it's good fun. It's good fun. I feel very lucky.
Brilliant. Maybe what I could get you to do is just to give us. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go and have a brief cooking demonstration.
Great.
Can you just give us a rough talk through what you're cooking, and then you very kindly also said, certainly with the pasta dish that you're going to do, is to plate it 3 ways. So just give us like a brief thing on maybe what you're going to do for us.
Yep. So I'm in the middle of writing a tinned fish cookbook called Hooked, which will be out in spring 27. And so I'm going to make 2 recipes from that book, which I'm writing the recipes at the moment. So this is fresh, hot off the press. The first one is a puttanesca pasta, which has got tinned anchovies in, and I'll be making that with linguine, so long pasta. Rich tomato sauce, got black olives in it, which can So we'll be plating that 3 ways. One will be a sort of more sort of naturalistic, as I would do it at home, or even for an editorial shot. So very kind of loose, lots of S shapes, lots of breaking the edge of the plate, that kind of thing. I'm going to do a really stylized kind of cylinder shape, sort of along the plate. Probably might be at the diagonal, haven't decided yet, or it might be sort of straight in the plate. Garnish, it's got flat leaf parsley in it, so I can show a couple of different ways of how, whole leaf or chopped, and how that changes the dish. And then the second recipe is a octopus blood orange, because it's in season at the moment, and fennel salad.
That's blowing my mind already, that is.
With I've done 2 different garnishes already, so because I made them yesterday, because they need to sort of sit, so it's like a shallot and chili garnish. One is finely chopped, and the other one is finely sliced, because they look different, exactly the same ingredients, but they just look different. So I just want to show how that can change the look of a dish. And I'm going to do that 3 ways as well. So more kind of, editorial, sort of stylized, maybe a bit sort of asymmetrical, and then a bit more kind of ordered in sort of placement of ingredients, kind of in different sort of spaces. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I can't wait to see it. Lou, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. After listening to the podcast all the way through, I hope one thing feels clear. Beautiful plates don't just happen. They're considered, they're edited. Whether that's sketching beforehand, collecting references, taking something away instead of adding more, or simply using the rim of the plate as your frame, well, none of that requires a magazine shoot. It just requires intention, and maybe that's the takeaway. Pause before you plate. Ask what the eye sees. Make one deliberate decision. If this side of food interests you, the structure behind it, the critique, the decision making, I've started experimenting with a membership built around exactly that. Not to replace this free content, but to go deeper. There are members-only Plating Gym critiques, where I break down exceptional plates from professional kitchens, and maybe sometimes from this community, so you can see the decisions that go through into the design. It's for people who don't just want inspiration, they want to improve intentionally. Now, if that sounds like you, you'll find the link in the description below. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next one.